Welcome back to Little Stories Around Us. Today, I want to tell you a story that is not only about money. It is a story about order, about fear, about trust, and about one man whose name is still written on the doors of the largest bank in the United States. His name is J.P. Morgan. As you listen, you will also practice your English slowly, calmly, step by step. Before we begin, I want you to think about this question. In our world, who has real power? Is it a president with soldiers and police? Is it a famous movie star with millions of followers? Or is it the person who can stop a crisis with one decision, one phone call, one signature? Today's story will not tell you who is good and who is bad. It will simply show you how one man became a system. John Pierpont Morgan was born in 1837 in Hartford, Connecticut. He was not born poor. His father was already an important international banker. But the small boy who would one day guide the money of a whole nation did not start life strong. From childhood, J.P. Morgan was sick again and again. He had painful skin problems on his face. He often felt weak and tired. He could not run and play like other boys. While other children played outside, he sometimes stayed inside, angry, frustrated, and alone. His mother was loving but strict. His father, Junius Morgan, had almost no patience for weakness. He believed that life was simple. You are either disciplined or you are forgotten. This belief was pushed into young John every single day. While other children played games, he opened heavy books. He read numbers, learned about gold, and studied how money moved from one country to another. His father sent him to school in Boston and later to study in Germany. There he learned languages, finance, and the idea that money is not only a tool, it is a force that can shape nations. Even as a young man, he was different. He did not dream about adventures or becoming a hero in a storybook. He dreamed about systems. He once said that he did not want a hobby, he wanted a kingdom. At the age of 20, he started work in New York for a banking firm connected to his father's company in London. From the first day, he was surrounded by huge deals, international trade, and powerful men who could move markets with a simple decision. He did not talk much. He watched. He listened. He learned how fear can crash a market and how confidence can save it in a single moment. Slowly, a new personality was born. J.P. Morgan became cold, sharp, and very direct. People said his eyes were deep and hard and that his face was almost frightening. He walked into a room as if he already owned it. He hated weakness, he hated confusion, and he hated anything that was not done well. His clothes were perfect, his watches exact, his cigars expensive. Behind this outside image, his beliefs were strong and simple. Numbers do not lie, he thought. People do. During the American Civil War, he made his first famous and very controversial deal. He bought old rifles from the government for a low price and then sold them back to the government for a much higher price. Many people were angry. They said he was using war to become rich. Others said he was simply using the rules of business. This story is still discussed today, but for J.P. Morgan, it was his first big lesson in public opinion. He understood that in finance, you can make money, but you also create a reputation. Some will call you a savior, others will call you a monster. After the war, he joined forces with another powerful banker, Anthony Drexel, and together they built one of the most important private banks in the United States. Morgan began to invest in railroads, steel, telegraph lines, and electric companies. When a company was in trouble, he did not only give money and walk away. He entered the company, changed its leaders, and reordered everything from the top. People even created a word for this process. They called it Morganization. It meant to fix a broken company the Morgan way by bringing strict order or letting it die. While America's trains moved across the land, carrying steel, coal, and people, many railroad companies were fighting each other, lowering prices, and slowly destroying their own profits. The whole system was close to collapse. J.P. Morgan decided that chaos was not acceptable. In one famous meeting, he brought rival railroad leaders together on his private yacht. He listened to their arguments and then spoke quietly but clearly. They must cooperate or they would all fail. By the end of the night, they agreed. The war was over, and Morgan became the invisible king of railroads. But his influence was not limited to trains. He helped finance new electric power companies, including the one that later became General Electric. He supported new technologies and big industrial projects. Slowly, he became something more than a banker. He became a person people called when they were afraid. And fear was coming. In 1893, the United States entered a deep financial crisis. Banks were failing. People were losing their savings. The value of the dollar was in danger because the government was running out of gold. If the gold reserves became too small, the dollar could collapse. The president at that time did not know what to do. So he called J.P. Morgan. Morgan traveled to Washington, entered the White House, and offered a solution. He would organize a huge loan of gold to the government in exchange for bonds and interest. It was not charity, it was business. But it worked. Gold returned to the treasury, the dollar was saved, and the panic slowly ended. After this, many people began to believe a surprising idea. When the government was too weak to protect the economy, one private banker could step in and save it. Some were grateful. Others were deeply worried. How could one man have more power than a whole government? Newspapers began to ask this question, but Morgan did not answer. He simply moved on to his next project. At the end of the 19th century, steel became the most important material in the modern world. It was used in bridges, ships, factories, and skyscrapers. One name ruled the steel industry: Andrew Carnegie. He was emotional, public, and proud. J.P. Morgan was cold, private, and controlled. They were completely different. Still, their stories were about to connect. Morgan wanted to build something the world had never seen before, the first corporation worth more than $1 billion. To do that, he needed Carnegie's company. Carnegie at first did not want to sell, but as he grew older, he finally wrote a number on a small piece of paper, the price for his life's work. When Morgan saw the note, he did not argue. He simply said, "I accept." With that, the largest industrial deal in history at that time was born. Carnegie became one of the richest men in the world, and Morgan created U.S. Steel, the first billion-dollar corporation. Behind this number was something more powerful. It showed that a private company, directed by one man, could be stronger than many governments. Of course, power always brings questions. People wondered, is this safe? Is this fair? Does one man control too much? In the early 1900s, the United States government finally pushed back. New laws tried to break large business groups and stop monopolies. One of Morgan's companies, Northern Securities, was taken to court and divided. Later, an investigation called the Peugeot Committee studied how much control a small group of bankers, including J.P. Morgan, had over the national economy. They found that he and his partners sat on the boards of many powerful companies and banks, controlling huge amounts of money. At the same time, another storm was building. In 1907, the country faced a new panic. Small banks failed. Investors were afraid. There was still no central bank, no Federal Reserve. Once again, all eyes turned to J.P. Morgan. He was older now, tired and often in pain, but his mind was still strong. In his private library in New York, he called the top bankers together. He studied their balance sheets, asked hard questions, and decided which institutions could be saved and which could not. When some bankers refused to help, he locked the doors and told them that no one would leave until they agreed to support the system. Through long nights of negotiation, they finally created a rescue plan. Money was promised to weak but important banks. Confidence began to return. The crisis slowly calmed. The newspapers said that Morgan had saved Wall Street and maybe the whole country. But this time, something changed.
People were thankful, but they were also afraid of their own dependence. They asked, "What happens next time, when this man is gone?" The answer came a few years later. In 1913, the United States created the Federal Reserve System, a central bank designed to manage money, interest rates, and financial stability. In a way, the country decided that no single person should ever again carry so much financial power. The system that followed was, in part, a reaction to J.P. Morgan's life. In his final years, Morgan spent more time in Europe. He visited cathedrals, art galleries, and quiet streets in old cities. His health was worse, but his love for art and history was strong. He had collected paintings, books, and rare objects for many years. These treasures were not only for himself. He later opened the Morgan Library in New York, a place where the public could see great works of culture and history. For a man often described as cold, this was a surprisingly generous gift. In 1913, while staying in Rome, J.P. Morgan died at the age of 75. Around the world, newspapers reported his death. The New York Stock Exchange closed for a short time to honor him, something they usually did only for presidents. Many people were still unsure how to feel about him. Some saw a hero who had saved the economy. Others saw a man who had enjoyed too much power. But almost everyone agreed on one fact. He had changed the way the financial world worked. When people learned the size of his personal fortune, they were surprised. For a man who had helped build billion-dollar corporations, his own wealth was much smaller than they expected. He was rich, but not the richest. This detail is important because it shows something about his true goals. He was not only chasing money, he was chasing control, order, and the feeling that the system was safe in his hands. Today, his name still lives in J.P. Morgan and in the modern bank J.P. Morgan Chase. His library and museum are open to the public. People can walk through quiet rooms, look at old books and paintings, and think about the strange life of a man who loved silence more than speeches, and systems more than attention. So, what can we learn from this story? First, we see the power of trust. In every crisis, J.P. Morgan understood that money is not just paper or numbers, it is confidence. When people trust, the system stands. When they lose trust, everything shakes. Second, we see the importance of character. Even in huge deals, he often said that the first question is not about money, but about the honesty of a person. Third, we see that real power is often quiet. Morgan did not give big public speeches. He preferred a small room, a table full of papers, and a few key decisions. Finally, we see something about ourselves. We live in a world of systems that we do not always see. Behind our bank cards, our phones, our salaries, and our investments are structures built by people like J.P. Morgan. Some parts of these systems are fair, some are not. But understanding how they were built gives us more power than shouting about them without knowledge. As we end this story, take a deep breath. You have just traveled through many years of history and finance in simple English. Maybe you did not understand every word. That is okay. What matters is that you stayed, listened, and felt the shape of one human life. If this story helped you practice your English, or made you think more deeply about power and trust, you are welcome to return to this channel. There are many more stories waiting for you here. Stories of people who changed the world in loud and in quiet ways. When you are ready, we will meet again in the next story. Until then, keep learning, keep listening, and remember, you do not need to be loud to be strong. You only need to build something that lasts.